3 Golden Eagles for War Thunder. Link in the description. Hello you sexy beasts, welcome back to War Thunder. This is the P-61C-1 American Tier 3 heavy fighter slash strike fighter. This interesting looking twin engine aircraft sits at a battle rating of 4.3 in the Army fighter line and features 4 20mm cannons mounted in the low fuselage, carrying a massive total of 800 rounds, as well as a remote controlled turret featuring 4 50 cal machine guns with a total of 2120 rounds. The real thing could lock the turret to the front and had to be fired by the pilot, but that isn't implemented in the game. Speaking about real life, this aircraft is all sorts of heavy. With over 10,000 kilograms of empty weight, you're not going to win any ballet contests. Now, going into my first game with this aircraft, I was rather cautious. I've heard a lot of people complaining that this aircraft was horrible and not worth playing. And given that my last 2 videos were rather negative as well, I was afraid to turn into a grumpy old man with this one. I'm going to be straight up honest with you and tell you right away that I have not flown this aircraft too much. I've had maybe a total of 5 battles. The one you're watching on the screen right now is actually the second ever match I had in the P-61. So maybe what I'm about to say is pure placebo effect. But holy heck have I had fun in this thing. Now, I have a theory why people might think this aircraft is bad, but I'll leave that to later on in the video. Let's talk about stats first. Being so big and heavy, the overall stats of this aircraft are rather unfighter-like. The acceleration is rather bad, and you'll struggle to reach the alleged 692 km/h top speed in level flight. Speaking about top speed, the P-61's red lines at about 700 km/h IAS in a dive, but since you do get air brakes, that's generally not a problem. As for climb rate, I was pleasantly surprised. At a 10-degree angle, you can maintain about 350 km/h. Now, whilst most other fighters will always have the upper hand, with a bit of side climbing you can actually get up to altitude pretty fast, which combined with the guns makes this aircraft an interesting choice for the bomber hunter role. The turn rate is, as expected, not competitive with other more nimble fighters. However, it does turn surprisingly well for a 10-ton aircraft, and I've been able to dogfight with Focke 490s and P-47s. One problem that becomes apparent very quickly is that you do seem to lose a lot of energy in the turns, so you can't maintain sustained horizontal turning fights. I definitely suggest going for the evade and fire tactic, rolling away from an incoming enemy at the last second and slotting in behind them, putting the cannons to good use. Speaking of which, I found the cannons on this aircraft to be rather amazing. Now, I'm not a big fan of the American 20mm cannons. On other aircraft, like the F4U-1C and the early P-51, they are very inaccurate and shake the whole aircraft around with the recoil. To my surprise, I found them to be very reliable and accurate on the P-61. My guess is that the aircraft is heavy enough to simply ignore the recoil of the guns, and being mounted on the fuselage rather than on the wings massively aids with the accuracy. Of course, being 20mm cannons with HEFI shells, I found them extremely effective at crippling enemy aircraft from well over a kilometer away. It seems to me like the enemy doesn't expect you to be able to hit them from that far away, and either commit to head-ons or fly away from you in a perfectly straight line. Now, the 50 cals in the turret are a different matter. They aren't really useful in either the defensive or offensive role, with the gunner apparently being very short-sighted and not firing until the enemy is right on top of you, and the firing arc being limited to the upper half of the sky. The turret does have a pretty good coverage, however, being able to fire full 360 degrees around and 180 degrees up. Interestingly, since the turret is facing forwards by default, they act like an automated secondary support fire when you're close and behind an enemy fighter or bomber. And since they lock onto the target, you can do light evasive maneuvers whilst having your gunner light them up for you. You can also use the turret manually as a schräge Musik platform, being able to shoot at enemy bombers up to 1.5 kilometers higher than you and surprising them with a sneaky incendiary hailstorm. Apart from the guns, you also have the option to carry up to 4 1000-pound bombs, which is enough to take out a base all by yourself. At that tier, there are bombers that carry less. Sadly, the bombs are mounted under the wings, as the P-61 does not feature a bomb bay. As such, they are dropped 2 at a time, which makes them a bit wasteful when going for enemy tanks in combined battles. Then again, it would be a bit too overpowered if you could get 4 accurate bomb drops, given that you do get a virtual bombing reticule even in RB. Of course, you can also use the 20mm cannons rather effectively against light and medium tanks and light pillboxes. I personally prefer 50 cals for that, since they usually carry much more ammo, but since you do get a whopping 800 rounds, you don't really have to worry too much about ammo conservation. Which leads me back to why I found these guns absolutely amazing. Since I had so much ammo to play around with, I grew very confident very quickly using them. Now, in other aircraft, like for example the Hunter, I tend to be very conservative with my shots, since the ammo vanishes so quickly. More often than not, that makes it very hard for me to actually get kills. In this thing, I just spray and pray and get a surprising amount of random long-range kills thanks to that. And even when you do run out, you can still use the turret to some effect, as a single lucky bullet can set the enemy in flames, which, in RB at least, most of the time results in a kill. So why do so many people hate it? The answer is quite simple really. It sits in the wrong branch of the tech tree. See, my theory is that since the P-61 sits in the army fighter line, the majority of players automatically assume that it must be a fighter. And that is not how you use this aircraft. I found massive success in using it as what it is, a heavy fighter slash ground attacker. Much like the MU-410, the way you should employ this aircraft is to stay away from multi-aircraft dogfights and rather go for the bombers, singled out low-flying aircraft or head-on attacks. Given the optional bombs and the available ground target belts for both the turret 50s and the main 20s, you can also very effectively use this aircraft as a ground attacker, destroying enemy bases, going for ground targets and harassing player tanks. It is a very versatile aircraft, as long as you use it right and don't get caught up in a turn fight with more than 2 enemies. In League of Legends terms, it's a support, not an ADC. But that have just been my experiences with it. What have been yours? Will you give the P-61 another shot? If you like this video, make sure to slap that like button and subscribe if you're new around here. My name is MikeGoesBoom. Thanks for watching.